everyone, my name is Kaisa Ramawati. Here I am with my friend Arin Saptarini and Maharani Rama are going to talk about individual differences in second language learning to fulfill the course of language acquisition and development. I hope you enjoy! Many of us believe that individual differences that are inherent in the learner can predict success or failure in language learning acquisition. In this topic, we are going to discuss many aspects on how people speak language. We may see that each person has different background, which promotes different dialects and level of acquiring a language. We are going to explain three individual differences in second language learning, which are language aptitude, learning style, and age of acquisition.
Let's start with language aptitude. So, what is language aptitude? Language aptitude is a special ability thought to predict success in language learning. It has several components, which four of them are: first, the ability to identify and memorize new sound; two, understand the function of a particular word in a sentence; three, figure out grammatical rules from language sample; and four, remember new words. And from this component, it has two types of tests from language aptitude. The first one is MLAT or Modern Language Aptitude Test, and the second is PPAT or Pimsleur Language Aptitude Battery. So how we could improve our language learning aptitude? First, we need to read as widely as possible because reading is an excellent way for us to improve our verbal ability. But we need to make sure that we have read widely enough to cover genres or even area. When we read outside our comfort zone, we will encounter a range of new words that would help us to improve our verbal ability. Second, use what you learn. The best way to improve our language learning aptitude is by using new words that we learn in life. When you hear a new word, a phrase, or even an expression, try to incorporate it with someone else. The more you use the new words, the easier they are to remember. And the last is practice comprehension. Instead of quickly reading something, why don't we try to slowly reading it and then summing it up? Comprehension means we actively reflect on what we read instead of skimming it and then go to the next page. Also, try to tell someone else about what you read and then discover about something that you need to improve next time.
Now we are going to talk about learning style. As you know, in general, learning style is an individual characteristic and preferred ways of gathering, organizing, and thinking about the information. This learning style, Fleming divides into four styles, which is visual, oral, read or write, and kinesthetic, which usually known as work. Visual is for a person who learns best by seeing diagrams, flowchart, and etc. Oral is for a person who learns best by discussing, using a tape recorder, talking, and etc. Read or write is for a person who learns best by taking notes, reading an essay, and reports. And lastly, kinesthetic learning style are for a person who learns best by taking a hands-on approach, collecting a sample, and role-play. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, as you know, we cannot learn face-to-face. There's many challenges, especially for kinesthetic learning style. As you know, kinesthetic learning style is a person who learns best when they're taking a hands-on approach, collecting a sample, and role-play. But because of that, we need to adapt to the situation.
Age is easier to define and measure than personality aptitude or motivation, but the relationship between age and success in second language acquisition is hardly less complex or controversial. It is frequently observed that most children from immigrant families eventually speak the language of the new community with native-like fluency, while their parents often fall short of such high level of proficiency, especially in the spoken language. As we can see on the graph, the highest point is called the critical period, while the learners can acquire the language better than before they are getting older. However, the older the people, the ease of acquiring a second language will be decreased, since many factors that will be described in the current issues about acquiring language later in the last section. Before we go to the current issues about acquiring a language, now let's discuss about how people can acquiring a language. We call it as critical period. In critical period, the learning process is more than just pronunciation. The learners will also identify the grammar of a sentence. Initially, they may come up with a simple grammar like noun. For example, they may say like mama or papa or book. This stage of learning occurs in the age of 6 to 1 years old. In the age of 1 to 3 years, they speak a little bit clearer but with some grammar errors, like mama book or papa blanket. But in the age of 3 to 5 years old, they have excellent comprehension with few grammar errors. They may say like, she don't go anywhere yesterday, or she have 3 candies. In the age of 5 to 7 years, they have advanced fluency in which they speak in proper grammar and fluency. Well, this intuition of grammar occurs when the learners hear the words frequently from the environment, like their home or school and stuffs. And now let's come up about the current issues about language acquisition. There might be also issues that come up with comparing adult and child second language learners in the first place. For instance, it could be the case that children just tend to learn second languages in different settings than adult learners, and that this makes adults seem worse than they theoretically are. What do I mean by this? Well, we can imagine 2 different possibilities. In the first one, the children in these studies grow up sounds like native in both their first and second languages, whereas the adult learners only sound native in their first language, but fail to ever become native-like in their second language. This is what researchers have typically assumed is happening, although we haven't actually tested that assumption. However, there is another possibility. Suppose that we were to measure the language skill of the children in the studies in their first languages, and we found them to be below native levels. In this case, children cannot necessarily be characterized as having some hidden capacity for second language learning, but may instead be doing something more like losing or replacing their first language with a second language, that is, treating it as short of a second first language. While the finding that these children achieve native-like abilities in their second language would still be interesting in this case, it wouldn't necessarily suggest that children are better at learning second languages than adults, at least not the way we usually think of. So, are you acquiring more than one language? And what do you think about people's level of acquiring a language? Share your thoughts on the comment section below. See ya!